Moving into the afternoon then, I would like to welcome Professor Debbie Tolson to do the opening slot. And are you chairing the afternoon, Debbie?
Well, I didn't know. I'm very bad at timing, so I don't know whether you want me to.
So Debbie, she'll introduce herself properly rather than me doing it. I've already, I think many of you have touched base with her already and know her as well from her extensive work with Care for Older People. But I'll hand over to you, Debbie.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm not doing the poetry thing, but I think it's absolutely wonderful. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the global story, about what's going on in nursing home practice around the world. And if you know it, it will make sense. If it's new to you, hopefully it will be very affirming in terms of what you're all doing here together in Scotland. So I'm going to talk to you about a global development agenda. I'm going to talk to you about some studies that have happened and were inspired by this development agenda. And I'm going to get a little bit closer to home and just give you a flavour of some of the research that has been done in this university, but particularly through the Outside Scotland Centre for Policy and Practice. And you've already heard of one of our studies from Brian. But let's just stop and pause for a minute and think beyond what we know in Scotland, what we know in UK, or for Caroline, what you know in Germany. And just think about the diversity of this thing called nursing home practice. And you'll see here that there are different models. And sadly, there's still the custodial model where you are locked up and kept away from society, through to the medical, the skilled nursing, or more of a social care home model. The facilities range from those which replicate almost a prison environment through to small domestic environments, and the services that nursing homes offer around the world do vary. I've used the term long-term care. Unfortunately, in some countries, I would say it's warehousing. I wouldn't say that care comes into it, but trying to be positive, I've tried to capture that. So if you think that things could be better here, they could be better in every country around the world. So the initiative I want to talk to you about was developed, I'm sorry, I don't think we can see that very clearly, but IAGG is the International Association of Gerontology and Geriatrics, and WHO World Health Organization. And the reason for the work to be done and for assembling an international task force to look at nursing home practice around the world was the known variation that I've just mentioned to you in terms of the quality of care that older people in the later stages of their lives are experiencing. But very importantly, it's been driven by the belief that older people deserve the best, that don't necessarily have the best, and they certainly deserve the appropriate health care, the care that cherishes them and allows them to live the best life possible, and being cared for by staff who actually know what they're doing and why they're doing it. So the remit for the task force was actually to look at the domains for clinical research and quality of care issues, so that we could generate around the world an impetus for changing things and driving an improvement agenda. Allow me to digress. Just before I started working with the task force, I've become very interested in abuse and the inappropriate use of physical and chemical restraints in the care of older people. And a restraint is a form of abuse. And what we discovered when we reviewed the evidence was in nursing home practice in different countries of the world, including the UK, including Ireland, including Germany, in these facilities that were some form of care home, there were body belts, restraining vests, cuffs, bed rails, all sorts of things, or simple barriers being created by furniture. And what we know is actually there is no evidence to show that any of these things actually prevent harm. So I just want you to be mindful of that. So there is evidence that physical restraint does more harm than good. There is also evidence that chemical restraints, particularly for people with cognitive impairment, have serious adverse effects. And some of you will know that, some of you won't know the details so well. And I've done quite a lot of work with Dr. John Morley from the United States, and he always starts to talk to medics and geriatricians about whether you would prescribe this drug to your mother. And depending on whether you like her or not, your answer will vary. But you can see there the list of things. Increases her chance of dying by 10%. Now, 2006, we had one of the first robust studies which said that if you put training in, you can reduce the inappropriate use of antipsychotics. And yet in 2012, when we did a later review, we still found all those different things going on with the physical restraint and chemical restraints. And that's why the task force work was important, and that's just one example of where practice wasn't where it could be. Now, you probably can't see this in this light, I certainly can't see it here, but what you've got there is a list of 18 names. And all of the 18, bar one, me, was a doctor, leading an international global task force on nursing home practice. And I ask a question: where are the other nurses? Where are the nurse leaders in this? And that really perplexed me. So, guess who lead authored? Guess who got in there and persuaded the medics that if you want to change nursing home practice, the clue is in the title. It's about nursing care, it's about health and social care. It's not all about what the physician does. Some of it is. So what we did was we had a great gathering in Toulouse in France, and people were reviewing evidence from around the world and bringing issues from practice. And of course, with 17 doctors in the room, predominantly clinical issues were coming to the fore. But we agreed on 4 big domains of practice that needs to be in the improvement agenda: about leadership, quality indicators including clinical, education and behaviour to improve the prestige and status of working in this sector, and a research agenda. And if you're interested in reading more, there's a paper that might interest you. One thing that we all acknowledged was the elephant in the room was the cost of care, but we decided not to get distracted with it because it is too distracting. And I have been around and I've visited the most amazing care home in Hong Kong, which is luxury with a big L, and it's empty. And I asked why. It's beautiful, it's got all the latest things that you need for therapeutic, this, that and the other, and it's like a palace. And when I asked why, it was the people who could afford that care had choice, and they rather pay for care in their home. No surprise there. I've also been in countries in the Middle East where one nurse looks after 90 people, and you wonder why the one with dementia is tethered, naked and hosed down. It's because if they left that facility, they would be stoned by their family, because it is bringing shame on the family that they are a burden. So whilst we might say, oh, that sounds dreadful, actually the scenarios and the context where people are working makes a huge difference into what is actually protected care, even if it would not be acceptable in this country. So cost and the elephant we've ignored. We focused on these 4 domains. I'm not going to read them through, but these translated into 16 recommendations. About leadership, They recommended developing an alliance for nursing home practice. They recommended showcasing internationally excellence so we could all learn from each other, and creating positive work conditions. And my home life is doing quite a few of those, which I think is just wonderful. We may be at the beginning of some of these, but this is a really, really important initiative that is responding to, perhaps coincidentally, the recommendations of that global task force. Some of the clinical essentials and quality indicators, and again, the studies and the projects that are wrapping around and coming from the My Home Life social movement are actually responding to this and fitting that agenda. The research agenda included the need for an ethical approach. And I still hear in this country people saying to me that I research in nursing homes. This is not necessarily health professionals or social care professionals research. I'm going to research in nursing homes because it's easier to get permission. There is a myth that it is easier. It is a myth out there that the people in nursing homes are somehow easier participants in research. But around the world, people experiment, unfortunately, on older people and people with dementia. So, 6 research priorities were identified, which included some surveys. You can hopefully see my influence with family, personal preferences of care. But there was a whole host of things that needed to be done. A few pieces of work have been delivered by members of that task force, and I'm just highlighting a few here. One of them was to review the state of play in Central Europe and look at what was going on there. And again, vast variations in practice and the resources and the opportunity for particularly nurse and social care professionals to actually get qualifications and respect for working in care facilities that are akin to nursing homes or care homes. We did a survey of practice and the way things are organised in 30 countries, and one of the interesting things there is that 35% of residents were assessed for their health and social care needs. So what happened to everybody else who had no assessment in that care home? And you see there 82% of countries of that study reported that residents were having 6 or more drugs daily. And when we looked at what those drugs were, some of them were chemical restraints. There was no doubt about it, it was chemical restraining. And if you talk to any of the geriatricians about polypharmacy, they will say, if you go above the 5th drug, it's probably the drug that's going to kill you, regardless of what that drug is. We surveyed nursing home priorities in a separate piece of work, and the top priority around the world was the care of people with cognitive impairment and dementia in care homes. And more recently, there's been a publication looking at what is this thing we call a care home. So moving on, just to give you a flavour of some of the things that we've done here in the Alzheimer's Scotland Centre, Palliaire, which is this project here, is a European piece of work where we've looked at creating a positive narrative about advanced dementia, and we have differentiated advanced dementia as an extended period of palliative care before severe dementia, before death and dying. And what we found in a big literature review was that people can live with advanced dementia for months up to 10 years. There's a lot of living to be done in those months and those years, and we think that's a very important contribution to nursing home practice. So we've developed some modules, we've developed an international community of practice, it's still live, and you can join that if you are interested. But it's really important, we believe, to have dementia-specific palliative care models. And we are recommending a movement towards Palliaire approaches, and you'll see some publications that we've done about that. We have had some studies which have looked at What is quality of life if you have severe dementia but you're not yet dying, so you're close to the final stages? Some people would say it's the end stage of dementia, but you're not in your last 3 weeks of life. What is quality of life for these people? And echoing some of the things we heard about earlier this morning, what Margaret found, who did this study, was that you need a much more nuanced understanding of the embodied communication of that person with severe dementia if you're going to respond. Enhanced sensory care, this is about individualised sensory care administered in a different form of day care that we think could actually be part of an early introduction to a nursing home, to a care home, before you are admitted. So you get to know the staff, and it could be delivered in the nursing home environment but by a team, and that's different from the complementary therapies. We've done work on football-focused reminiscence, very useful for men who disengage with some of the practices, and we have introduced this into care home environments in Scotland and in Spain. Food for thought is about making every mealtime count, work we've done with Erskine Hospital. And if you think about applied practice-based research and the research that you might be taking forward or want to take forward, if we have 20,000 people in our care homes in Scotland who have dementia and they have 3 meals a day, if we can improve the mealtime experience, not just the nutritional intake, that is 60,000 impactful moments of better care. Now that's making a difference. And you can see some of the other topics there that we have looked at. And our next piece of work that we're still shaping is about what happens if you have early onset dementia. There are people in their 40s, 50s, 60s who are still at work when they get their diagnosis. Where are they going to go when their families can no longer support them? I don't know. And just to remind you why we're all here and why it really matters that we get it right. On your wedding day, for example, you have your hopes and your dreams. And 59 years later, you celebrate your anniversary in the dementia unit. If you are that lady, if that is your mother, your aunt, your sister, you know she deserves the best care possible. You know her dreams. Or do you know what her dreams are now she's in that care home? We know that her husband, her partner, will not sleep at night if he's not confident in how you're looking after his wife when he can no longer be with her and at her side all the time. And that is why my home life matters, and that is why your practice-based research matters. And we have written a paper, and if you can see at the bottom of the slide, we being Belinda Graham and myself, about quality of life and care in nursing homes. And it's a little bit of a challenge if we're not actually looking at the clinical indicators. There are other things that matter.